Hello all, Michael here, also known as NJ Trains and Airplanes. I recently got myself a new microphone since I thought of trying to diversitize my videos a bit more. This video will sort of be like a pilot test to see how well these types of videos would do for the channel. I had some ideas for a few train related mini essay videos. Yes, I know that's been done to death by now, but also the idea to start narrating my future trip reports. So here's what I came up with. This is my tier list ranking every commuter railroad in the United States. Now I'm fully aware that Worldwide Railfan has done the same ranking already, but I'm doing this more out of inspiration, and I'll try to be as different as possible since this is more of my own ranking to not make it seem like I'm directly copying him. I'll be ranking each railroad based on several categories including scheduling frequencies, route coverage, scenery, railfanability, and a bit of my own personal thoughts. That being said, I have not visited or ridden every commuter railroad I'll be talking about, since this ranking is based more on common knowledge and how I personally feel towards each railroad, so please take my rankings with a grain of salt. This list will also include intercity railroads, but won't include any Amtrak commuter routes or light rail operators. All railroads mentioned need to have the little train icon on Google Maps or their own logos to count as commuter rails. Now then, we have 28 to rank, so I'll have to keep this brief. I'll start in alphabetical order, beginning with A train. Not to be confused with the more well-known A train on the New York City subway. While technically a light rail to some with its small European DMUs, its Google Maps icon shows the little train logo, so to me it counts as a commuter rail. A train is a suburban commuter rail in the Dallas, Texas metro area with only one line, a common trend with these American commuter rails, running 21 miles between Denton and Trinity Mills with 6 stations. Another common trend is that most of the stations are park and rides, with not much around them. Scheduled frequencies are pretty good for the most part, departing every 30 minutes all day on weekdays, but only every hour on Saturdays, and no service at all on Sundays. The scenery is pretty average, mostly just suburban neighborhoods, but some scenic highlights on the line include the T.C. Rice Jr. Natural Area and Louisville Lake, from one side, because the other side has I-35 in the way. While seeing European multiple units in the United States is a nice change from the norm, it can get boring for some after a while as it's the railroad's only rolling stock. While the line goes towards downtown Dallas, commuting into the city requires a transfer at Trinity Mills onto the dark green line light rail, with wait times between trains as long as 15 minutes at times, which can be a big inconvenience for many. Altamont Corridor Express. Known as ACE for short, this railroad currently has one 85-mile long line running between San Jose, Fremont, and Stockton, California, with 10 stations, though there is a plan for a second line to be built running between Modesto and Sacramento. Its opening date keeps getting delayed. Frequencies are pretty bad, with services in each direction being rush hour focused. 4 trains to San Jose in the morning, and 4 to Stockton in the afternoon on weekdays, and no weekend service at all, which makes this line very tough to railfan on. Again, this is something we'll see with most other railroads. While the usefulness of this line is lacking severely, the scenery definitely makes up for it. While the majority of this line runs through suburban neighborhoods, I have to say that ACE has to be the most scenic commuter railroad line in the country, with scenic highlights including the San Francisco National Bay Wildlife Refuge, Niles Canyon, and Altamont Pass with its rolling green hills, making for some great scenic railfanning opportunities. Rolling stock used to be good, with F40 locomotives and bi-level passenger cars, with a nice looking livery, but nowadays the F40s have been replaced with new Siemens Charger locomotives, with the ugliest livery of any commuter railroad. No thank you, please bring back the old livery. Arrow. This is the commuter line with the least I have to say about it, and I'm not even sure if this one really counts as a commuter railroad. This line is pretty much an extension of Metrolink's San Bernardino line, since one daily train runs along this line in each direction, but Arrow is pretty much its own thing, with its unique rolling stock having European Stadler Flirt DMUs. One line running 9 miles with 5 stations from San Bernardino to Redlands University. Frequencies are decent, running 7 days a week, alternating between 30 minutes to an hour on weekdays, and every hour on weekends. However, Metrolink doesn't run as frequently as Arrow, which can result in long transfer times at San Bernardino for a train into Los Angeles. Some of the station layouts are a bit confusing too, especially downtown Redlands with its 2 platforms. There's not much else to say about Arrow. It gets low ridership with its short line, and isn't the most exciting line to railfan, with its one type of train and its pretty boring scenery. The frequencies are the only real decent thing about it. Brightline. One of two intercity lines, and one of the few high-speed lines in the country, Brightline operates one line running 235 miles between Miami and Orlando International Airport in Florida, with only 6 stations. A trip over the entire line takes around 3.5 hours, with a maximum speed limit of 125 miles per hour, but only in the section between Orlando Airport and Cocoa. Brightline's rolling stock only consists of special Siemens Chargers train sets with venture coaches, with all the units being unique, having a sleek-looking livery with different colors on the coaches. Frequencies are actually pretty good, running hourly all day on the entire line, mind you, 7 days a week, which is a pretty rare thing to see on long lines like this. Most of the stations have other transport connections, but are still mostly park and ride stops with not much around them, with a few exceptions. The scenery is pretty nice, but gets better north of West Palm Beach with its more tropical greenery and views of the Indian River. There's a lot you can see while railfanning on this line. While it's mostly the same passenger trains, freight trains on the Florida East Coast Railroad occasionally pass by, and, if you're a railroad crossing nerd like me, you can see trains blasting over many grade crossings at speeds up to 110 miles per hour. Well, just hope someone doesn't drive through the crossing gate and gets hit by a train. Caltrain. The second of 3 commuter railroads in the San Francisco Bay Area. Caltrain only has one line running 77 miles from San Francisco to Gilroy, California with 31 stations. Caltrain has had the most progress made out of any commuter railroad in the country as of now, with its line between San Francisco and Tamiami being fully electrified just recently. Scheduling is really good actually, with there being 3 different service types, local, limited, and express services, kinda similar to how some commuter railways in Japan are run. Trains run 7 days a week, with local trains operating every 30 minutes all day, even on weekends, on the electric section only, making it very easy to travel between towns along the peninsula. Express services only operate on weekdays, and only during rush hour. Service on the southern section to Gilroy is much worse though, only operating on weekdays and during rush hour. Most of the stations are in built-up areas with other transit connections, with even a connection to the San Francisco Airport at Millbrae Station. While the high frequency of trains makes it very easy to railfan, it's all the same Stadler EMUs, which can get a bit boring after a while, on the electric section at least. The line used to have diesel service, such as F40s and MP54s. The latter can still be seen on the diesel section to Gilroy. Scenery is pretty decent, with some highlights including the San Francisco Bay, and running between the mountains and through farmland on the section south of San Jose. While Caltrain lacks a bit in railfanning appeal with its small fleet, and can definitely improve with more services to Gilroy, the rest of the positives I stated regarding its usefulness and accessibility, in my opinion, makes Caltrain one of the best commuter railroads in the country, and give me enough reason to rank it this high up. Coaster. Another California commuter rail, Coaster technically has 2 lines, the other being its Sprinter service to Escondido, but it's marked with the light rail icon on Google Maps, so it doesn't really count. Coaster's line runs between San Diego and Oceanside, California, 41 miles long, and has 8 stations. Just like Ace, Coaster's line is very scenic, with some highlights including Rose Canyon and views of the Pacific Ocean for a majority of the route north of Sorrento Valley. Some stations are shared with Amtrak's Pacific Surfliner, making Coaster feel pretty much like a local service that doesn't travel the whole route. Scheduling is pretty decent, though outside rush hour, trains seem to run every 2 hours and up to 20 to 40 minutes during rush hour. Weekend service looks to be hourly, with 2 trips in each direction running on Saturdays only. Rolling stock on Coaster isn't anything amazing, at least not anymore. Just more Siemens Chargers, again similar to Ace. To me, I feel like Coaster and Ace are pretty much the same, but I'll rank Coaster a bit higher for its better scheduling frequencies. CT Rail. Finally, our first commuter rail with more than one line, and our first commuter line in the Northeast. CT Rail operates 2 lines, both starting in New Haven, Connecticut, the Hartford line, which actually runs past Hartford to Springfield, Massachusetts, and Shoreline East to New London. a network totaling 121 miles and 22 stations. Frequencies on both lines aren't the best, as you can see. The Hartford line services are a bit better, but both lines also have services through Amtrak. Just focusing on CT Rail, frequencies aren't the best. Most stations have other transit connections and are easy walking distance to other destinations. Some scenic highlights include some parts of the SLE running along the Long Island Sound, and both lines running through some pretty heavily forested areas, which looks really colorful during the fall. CT Rail has a small variety of rolling stock, including Kawasaki M8s for SLE, since that line is electric, GP40-3Hs, and ex-Amtrak P40s for the Hartford line, pulling uncommon Mafursa coaches. The diesel fleet looks very nice, while the M8s are pretty much the same as Metro North's M8s. While CT Rail has pretty nice scenery and rolling stock, its low frequencies do take some points off. Good thing there's Amtrak to help out. Frontrunner. Frontrunner serves the Salt Lake City, Utah metro area with one line that's 83 miles long and has 15 stations. The line runs north to south from Ogden to Provo, crossing through downtown Salt Lake City in the middle. Kinda like San Francisco, the Salt Lake City metro area is pretty linear, and this line does a pretty good job serving most major areas. However, most stations are in suburban park and rides with not much around them. Their scheduling frequencies surprised me a bit, being pretty good, by North American standards, running every half hour during rush hours in both directions, I should add, and every hour during other times, and on Saturdays, but no service on Sundays at all. A few scenic highlights are views of the surrounding mountain ranges, the Jordan Narrows, and a quick glimpse of Utah Lake. Frontrunner's train sets are also a bit unique, since they can be a mix of single-level and double-level cars. Motive power is only MP36 diesels, with a nice red, white, and blue livery. So I'd say railfan appeal is pretty decent. The only things that can make this line better is if there were more destinations around some of the stations, and have service on Sundays. But other than that, Frontrunner's a pretty solid commuter rail. Long Island Railroad. With 11 lines, 126 stations, and 320 miles of track, serving over 75 million riders a year, Long Island Railroad is the busiest commuter railroad in the United States. And I have to say, I really like the Long Island Railroad. Frequencies on most lines are above average, with some lines having trains every 30 minutes in some areas outside rush hour, even on weekends. All lines run 7 days per week, though some lines don't get as much service, like the eastern parts of the Ronkonkoma branch, the Montauk branch, and the Oyster Bay branch. Jamaica Station, which is one of the busiest stations in the country, serves 10 of the lines, sees trains every 2 to 5 minutes, making it an important hub. Most stations are in old downtowns and have other connections to destinations, and the network covers most of the island's most populated areas. There are still a few gaps, like the West Hempstead branch, which could be connected with the Hempstead branch. Railfanning appeal isn't totally exciting. While there are areas that get non-stop trains all day long, the only trains you'll see are mostly M7s and M9s, and if you're lucky, then you'll see an M3 or a DE30 diesel. Still, the Long Island Railroad is a great network to railfan. Most of the nicest scenery is on the eastern parts of the Ronkonkoma and Montauk branches, where the areas get more rural. Otherwise, most of the outside is either suburban neighborhoods or New York City's outer boroughs. While some parts of the network can benefit with some improvements compared to most other railroads, the Long Island Railroad is definitely one of the best in the country in my opinion. Maryland Area Rail Commuter. MARC, as it's known, is one of 2 railroads that serves the Washington, D.C. and Baltimore metro areas with 3 lines, 42 stations, and 188 miles of track. One of these lines is the Penn Line between D.C. and Perryville, Maryland, which has been described as the fastest commuter line in the United States, with trains reaching speeds of up to 125 miles per hour, since it runs entirely on the Northeast Corridor and is the only electric line. It's also the only line that runs 7 days a week, with hourly service outside of rush hour. Service to Perryville only gets a few trains during the day. The Penn Line is the only line that runs on weekends, but service could be much better with frequencies of 1 to 3 hours and no service past Baltimore. The other 2 lines are much worse, unfortunately, with the Brunswick line only getting rush hour service, inbound only in the morning and outbound only in the afternoon, while the Camden line only gets a few more trains in each direction during the day. Interestingly, MARC's Brunswick line features West Virginia's only non-Amtrak served station, Duffields. Some scenic highlights include Midland Park on the Penn Line, Thomas Viaduct on the Camden Line, and Harper's Ferry Station on the Brunswick Line. I think the Brunswick Line has to be the most scenic of the three. In terms of rail fanning, you have some variety besides scenery. The Penn Line operates the last remaining HHP electric units still in service, and Siemens chargers, which makes absolutely no sense since this line is electric. On the diesel lines, there are MP36 and rare GP39PH locomotives, and coaches from Nippon Sharyo. I feel like MARC can be much better if they just increase frequencies on their diesel lines, but if all their lines ran all day, then I feel like its potential can be realized. Still, it's a commuter rail I'd love to visit one day. MBTA. The Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority is one of the oldest commuter railroads, serving the Boston, Massachusetts metro area, as well as neighboring Providence, Rhode Island. Their network has 12 lines and 148 stations. I'll give props for their route coverage, since their network has lines in all directions. In fact, a small extension with 5 stations just opened recently. The only downside though is that MBTA is pretty much divided into 2 networks that aren't connected. A lot of towns along the MBTA are older towns, meaning that most of the stations are in dense neighborhoods, making it easy to walk to and from the stations. Frequencies on all lines are pretty average. All lines run 7 days a week, hourly outside rush hour. However, all lines seem to run every 2 hours on weekends, which could be improved by having hourly service. Out of all the lines, the best one in terms of frequency is definitely the Fairmount line, having half-hourly frequencies most of the day, even on weekends. A few scenic highlights include Rumney Marsh on the Newburyport-Rockport line, and various wildlife areas that some other lines run through. Kinda like Frontrunner, train consists on some lines have a mix of single-level and multi-level cars. Older F40 diesel locomotives still operate, as well as the unique HSP-46 locomotive. The only commuter lines have this type of locomotive, and GP40 MCs. MBTA is also one rare example of diesel under the wires, since the Providence line runs along the electrified Northeast Corridor, and MBTA doesn't have any electric locomotives. I think the MBTA has a lot of great things about it, but with some improvements to frequencies and the connection of the 2 networks, it could be a lot better. Metra. Metra is another big one. In fact, it's the largest commuter railroad in the United States in terms of number of stations. Serving the Chicagoland area and a bit of southern Wisconsin, with 11 lines and 242 stations. Metra is an interesting one, because you have several lines that run throughout the day, every hour, or better, 7 days a week, and then you have lines that run only a few trains a day during rush hour, with no weekend service at all. Thankfully, there are only 3 lines that are mostly rush hour focused. Frequencies on the other lines range from decent to great. The best line is the Metra Electric District, with its 3 branches and frequent service serving the South Chicago area. The worst line is definitely the Heritage Corridor, with only 3 trains a day in each direction and no weekend service. Just like the Armchair Urbanist said about this line has to be the worst served commuter line in the United States. Anyway, even though Metra's network is pervasive, like most other networks, it has some gaps and doesn't do a great job connecting to other suburbs, besides those on the same line. I couldn't find many scenic highlights on Metra, since most of the network runs through urban and suburban areas, but lines like the ends of the Union Pacific Northwest and Southwest lines run through some pretty nice looking farm country, but not for very long. But it's nice that a commuter rail serves some rural communities. When it comes to rail fanning, well, Metra and Chicagoland as a whole, I must say is a rail fanner's paradise, for the United States at least. I've never rail fanned in Chicago, but I sure as hell would love to at some point. Metra is the first commuter railroad on this ranking to feature special heritage units, which we all know are a big highlight to see when rail fanning. These include 4 heritage railroad units and 1 special unit engine. Metra has a variety of locomotives like F40s, F59 PHIs, and bi-level EMUs on the electric district. And the most strange of all, converted SD70 Mack freight locomotives? I still don't know why Metra decided to convert these old freight locomotives, but hey, it makes Metra all the more unique. Most Metra lines are also along busy freight corridors. The best line for rail fanners is definitely the BNSF line, where you'll see Metra and BNSF trains and a few Amtrak trains too. It's a place I'd definitely love to visit one day. Though some lines could have better frequencies, and some gaps between lines should be filled, I still think Metra deserves this ranking here. Metrolink. Our 5th California-based commuter rail, Metrolink is the largest in the state, serving the Los Angeles and San Bernardino areas with 8 lines and 69 stations. Nice. Metrolink could be so much better than it is now. The only line really with somewhat good service is the San Bernardino line, with up to half-hourly service between Los Angeles and Montclair, and hourly service to San Bernardino. Weekend service is not that great, only 8 trains in each direction. Many of the other lines aren't that frequent. The Orange County and Ventura County lines are also served by Amtrak's Pacific Surfliner, which helps them a little bit, but they don't serve every station. A lot of lines have weekend service, but some have as few as 2 trains a day. Like, come on. As one of the most populated cities on the West Coast, you would think rail service would be a bit better throughout the week, right? On the flip side, some Metrolink lines have some very nice scenery. These include running along the beach on the Orange County and Inland Empire lines, farmlands and the Santa Susana Pass on the Ventura County line, and the winding canyon route of the Antelope Valley line. These scenic areas make for very nice railfanning spots. For rolling stock, Metrolink only has standard Bombardier bi-level coaches, with some Rotom coaches and cab cars mixed in, and for motor power, nowadays most trains are pulled by the particular EMD F125 locomotives. I find these engines a bit strange, especially with their very large windows. I think Metrolink is almost decent. It has some nice routes with interesting equipment, but the frequencies on most lines are below average, especially for a city as large as Los Angeles. I would hope Metrolink can improve in the near future. Metro North. The Long Island Railroad's sister railroad, Metro North serves the northern suburbs of New York State on both sides of the river and western Connecticut. Metro North has 5 lines, 3 branch lines, and 124 stations, though the 2 lines west of the Hudson are also jointly shared by New Jersey Transit. All lines have service every day of the week. Service is a lot better on the east of Hudson lines, with trains up to every half hour or more on the southern sections of the Hudson and Harlem lines. West of Hudson service could be better. There's no real consistent hourly schedule on either line. As for scenery, well, I must say that Metro North is definitely the most scenic railroad on the East Coast, with scenic highlights including pretty much the entire Hudson line and Port Jervis lines, the northern section of the Harlem line through the mountains, and the Moodna Viaduct, also on the Port Jervis line, which is in fact the longest trestle bridge on the East Coast. The east of Hudson network also has an advantage, since all services go directly into New York City, ending at the famous Grand Central Terminal, while the west of Hudson routes terminate at Hoboken, across the river from the city. Metro North has a variety of rolling stock, including both diesels and electric MUs. On the west of Hudson, rolling stock is similar to New Jersey Transit with F43Cs and GP40PHs, with the only coaches being Comet 5 cars. East of Hudson has a larger variety, with EMUs like M3s and M7s on the Harlem and Hudson lines, and M8s on the New Haven and New Canaan lines. Diesels on the east include General Electric P32 ACDMs and Brookville BL20s pulling Shoreliner cars, although the P32s are scheduled to soon be replaced by new Siemens SC42DM Chargers in the coming years. Though don't expect them to be replaced soon, as all of Metro North's Heritage and Special units are only on their P32s, with their newest Heritage unit just being unveiled recently. While Metro North isn't as extensive as its Long Island sister, its frequencies and scenic highlights, especially on the east of Hudson network, make Metro North one of the better commuter railroads. New Jersey Transit, the third railroad serving New York City, and also my home railroad. New Jersey Transit is marked as the only statewide commuter railroad, as it has lines all over the state, except not exactly, but I'll get into that. New Jersey Transit has 12 lines and 166 stations. Most of the lines are in northern New Jersey, with service in and around New York City, and only one line in the south, the Atlantic City line from Philadelphia to Atlantic City. Frequencies vary by line, but most have hourly service 7 days a week, except for most of the Montclair-Boonton line and the Raritan Valley line west of Raritan have no weekend service at all. A lot of stations are in older town centers, making it easy to walk to most stations, and 5 of the 12 lines are either mostly or fully electrified. Some scenic areas include the western parts of the Morristown line, the Lyndhurst Marsh on the main line, pretty much the entire Gladstone branch, and the section of the Atlantic City line that runs through the Pine Barrens. New Jersey Transit has a huge variety of rolling stock, which also includes the most heritage units of any commuter railroad. Diesel engines include ALP45s, GP40PHs, PL42 ACDMs, and 2 F40PH2 CATs, which are still in service. Electric rolling stock includes ALP45s, ALP46s, and Aero 3 EMUs, which are sadly soon to be replaced. And yes, I said ALP45 twice. That's because these locomotives are both diesel and electric. As I said earlier, New Jersey Transit's network is mostly in the north, which means there are many gaps in southern New Jersey that can easily be filled by rail, including lines to big towns like Vineland and Glassboro. Northern New Jersey also has some gaps which can be filled, like converting the many abandoned lines for passenger use. Now, New Jersey Transit is nowhere near perfect. It has many problems like electric wire issues, congestion, and signaling problems, mostly on the section going into Penn Station. These issues are slowly being addressed. While New Jersey Transit does have its issues, and many people are going to disagree with this, I'll still rank it high up for its great railfanning opportunities and for making attempts to improve. Northstar. I sometimes forget this commuter railroad even exists. We're back to railroads with one line again. Northstar serves the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, running 40 miles from downtown to Big Lake with 7 stations. I'm going to be blunt here. Northstar is not a good railroad. First off, frequencies are terrible, with only 4 trains a day in each direction, only in rush hour, and no weekend service. Funnily enough, service was actually worse a few years ago, so glad to see Northstar is making improvements there. So it's good for downtown office workers, but useless for almost everyone else. Second, every station, with the exception of downtown, is all big park and rides with not much around them. Elk River is probably the most infuriating, because instead of building the station in the downtown, where most homes and shops are at, they built the station 2 miles away with nothing else around it. I seriously don't know the logic with that. Guess those cars gotta park somewhere. Scenery is pretty meh. The line does run through some nice farmlands in places, but that's about it. Rolling stock is pretty standard. MP36 locos with bi-level cars. Delivery is pretty nice though. I have nothing against Northstar personally, but it is pretty much the textbook definition of an American commuter rail in a more car-built city, made only to serve people going into downtown. This railroad needs a lot of improvement to be considered decent, and is the first railroad that I'll be ranking this low. Railrunner. New Mexico probably isn't the state you would expect there to be a commuter railroad to be, but here we are. Railrunner has one line running 96 miles from Santa Fe to Belen via Albuquerque. This makes Railrunner feel more like an inner-city line than a commuter line. Frequencies aren't the best. Service is mostly rush hour focused in both directions, with a few afternoon trains during the weekdays. There is weekend service on both days surprisingly, but only a few trips in each direction, several hours apart. The route the line runs along is quite scenic, with views of the Rio Grande River between Belen and Albuquerque, and views of the desert and farmlands on most of the route, making for some picturesque filming and photo locations. Rolling stock is, again, the common MP36 locomotives with bi-level coaches. I do like the paint scheme though, being a Roadrunner having its head at the start of the engine and the end at the following car. I feel like Railrunner is similar to Coaster and Ace, having a very scenic route and a nice paint scheme on its rolling stock, only for it to be held back by its lackluster frequencies. It's somewhere in the middle for me. RTD. RTD is weird, as its network is half heavy rail and half light rail. RTD serves the Denver, Colorado metro area, with its heavy rail consisting of 4 lines and 22 stations. The 4 lines specifically are the A line, B line, G line, and N line. The entire network is fully electrified, which is something that's very rare for commuter railroads, especially out west. When it comes to frequencies, RTD really surprised me, as frequencies on all lines are really good. The least frequent line, being the B line, still has hourly service, while the most frequent line, the A line, has service every 20 minutes during the day, even on weekends, which makes this line almost as frequent as most suburban lines in Europe. While frequencies on RTD are great, railfanning opportunities, not as much. RTD mostly runs through suburban Denver, and while the A line runs through some open flatland until reaching the airport, it isn't all super exciting, and the only rolling stock they have are Silverliner 5 EMUs. The only real nitpick I have with RTD is that its route network is too damn small. Now I know half of it is light rail, but still, the B line especially only has 4 stops. The network should definitely be extended to neighboring cities, like the B line being extended to Boulder, and the G line should go to Golden. And maybe a new line or two between the suburbs, kinda like the R line light rail. But nonetheless, RTD is a good commuter rail by American standards, and I really hope they can expand more. SEPTA. SEPTA serves the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania metro area, with 2 lines going into neighboring Delaware and New Jersey. The network consists of 13 lines and 153 stations. 3 lines are technically owned by Amtrak, with SEPTA running as more of a local service. SEPTA is interesting because it's the only commuter railroad to have through-running services through Philadelphia, whereas a service starts on one line and ends on another on the same train. Frequency levels vary by line, with most having hourly service on weekdays, but some lines having service every 2 hours on weekends. The most frequent lines are the Airport and Paoli-Thorndale lines, with the Airport line having service every half hour every day. It's what you should expect from an airport line. The least frequent line is the Kinwood line, with only 6 round trips a day on weekdays only. The line is very short though, and there are other alternatives, so it's not the worst thing. There isn't many scenic areas around SEPTA, as most of the network is through urban and suburban areas. A few patches of farmland here and there, but not much else. Sorry SEPTA fans. Rolling stock consists of EMU train sets such as Silverliner 4s, which look exactly like Aero units on NJ Transit, Silverliner 5s, same as RTD, and SEPTA's only actual locomotives are ACS 64s, which pull older Comet coaches, but these trains only run during peak times. And this is a bit of a cold take, but I'm not really a fan of the livery they chose for the ACS 64s. I'm not sure why, they just look weird to me. The older AEM 7s look so much nicer. Many lines could be extended to cities such as Westchester, Reading, and Allentown, but overall, SEPTA is a pretty good commuter railroad. Hi, Editing Michael here. So SEPTA just announced recently that they'll be cutting back some routes if the state of Pennsylvania cuts back funding for SEPTA. I really hope this doesn't happen, because it would really be a shame if SEPTA would cut back some routes just because the state stopped funding them. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Right now this doesn't affect the ranking because it hasn't gone into effect yet, but if it does then SEPTA's ranking will definitely be lowered. SmartRail. The last commuter rail line in California, the Sonoma-Marin Area Rail Transit as it's fully known, has one line between Larkspur and Sonoma County Airport in Santa Rosa with 13 stations. Frequencies during weekdays are pretty good, with trains every 30 minutes or every hour, but weekend service is much worse, with only 8 trains a day in each direction. Most stations are in suburban neighborhoods, but a few are nearby downtowns like San Rafael and Pizzauma, to name a few. They only have one rolling stock, the unique DMUs by Nippon Sharyo. I couldn't find the exact class name of these sets. They're literally just called DMUs. There's a few scenic highlights, like Olompoli State Historical Park, where the line runs directly through it. A few things could be improved, such as their weekend services, and they are trying to extend north. Not a bad line overall, but could be better. South Shore. This one is an interesting one. Like Brightline, the South Shore line is an intercity line, but still technically counts as commuter rail. It's actually the last 20th century style interurban line in the United States. The single line runs 90 miles from downtown Chicago, Illinois to South Bend, Indiana, but to the airport, and not downtown, which is a bit weird. Frequencies are pretty typical, service every half hour or so during rush hour, and every hour the rest of the day. Most services only go as far as Michigan City, with only a select few trains going all the way to South Bend Airport. Weekend service isn't the best, with trains every 1 to 3 hours. Scenery wise, well, it's not the best. At least, not at first. Between Chicago and Gary, Indiana, the area is very industrial, and Gary being, well, if you know, you know. After Gary though, the scenery gets a lot nicer, with highlights including Dune National Park and the rural countryside after Michigan City. All of their current rolling stock is built by Nippon Sharyo with a mix of single-level EMUs and multi-level Highliner 2 EMUs, the same ones on Metra's electric district. South Shoreline is currently planning to build a new line to Dyer, Indiana. Who knows when that'll get finished. I think weekend service should really be increased and more services should run the whole line. Having a direct connection with the South Bend Amtrak station would also allow for better transfers between the two railroads. But it's not terrible overall, and a good example of a classic American interurban. Sounder. Sounder is the northernmost commuter railroad in the US, serving the Seattle and Tacoma metro areas, with 2 lines, totaling 81 miles long, and only 12 stations. The N line only has 3 stops north of King Street, which is the main terminal, with the S line having the remaining 8. Unfortunately, Sounder is another example of a railroad with a scenic route, but terrible frequencies. The S line is a bit better, but it's still mostly rush hour focus, with more services to Seattle in the morning, and more to Tacoma in the afternoon. The N line is completely rush hour focused, making it nearly useless for other trips. And both lines have no weekend service at all. The only redeeming part about Sounder is, again, the route. Specifically the N line, which runs along the shores of Puget Sound for most of its run. Sounder has a small fleet, having some F59 PHIs and a few MP40s, with again, the common bi-level coaches. I do like the wavy livery though, with its shades of blue and teal. Kinda represents the area Sounder runs through. My complaints are nothing new at this point, just add a few more trains to the schedule to make it at least decent. Sunrail. The commuter railroad in Orlando, Florida that serves everyone but tourists. Sunrail has 1 line running north to south, 61 miles long, and 17 stations. Even though Orlando is one of America's most visited cities, the line only really serves local commuters going into downtown. Frequencies are actually not too bad. Every 30 minutes in the morning and evening rush hour in both directions, and almost every hour during the day. However, like with many other railroads in America, there's no service on weekends. The route isn't the most scenic since it runs through suburban Florida, but the bit through downtown Orlando is a highlight, and the section between DeBary and DeLand running through the woods and near a few lakes is also scenic. By the way, that part of the line just opened a service last year, so good on Sunrail for completing a proposed extension. One oddity though is that trains don't run to Orlando Airport as of now. Even though there's a track connection from the main line to the airport, having a connection with Brightline would make traveling to downtown Orlando possible from Miami or the airport by train, even if it requires a connection. For railfannability, Sunrail only has 1 type of train, again, MP32s with bi-level coaches. The paint scheme is really nice though. But Sunrail is also infamous for having the worst train horns of any commuter railroad, period. Trinity Railway Express. Back to the Dallas, Texas area, TRE is another single-line commuter rail running between 2 cities, Dallas and Fort Worth, with 8 stations in between. Many stations are in suburban neighborhoods with not much around them, but one thing I will give TRE points for is its frequencies. Trains run every 30 minutes till about 10:30 a.m., then start again around 4:30 p.m., with hourly service in between. Trains run hourly all day on Saturdays, but no service at all on Sundays, which is the only downside. Scenery isn't the most exciting, it's all mostly suburban and industrial areas. A bit of greenery around Bell Station, but that's about it. Not many other transit connections at each station either. I think the livery of the railroad is cool though, being that of the Texas flag, showing off this commuter railroad is truly the most American looking out of all of them. TRE does have some interesting motive power. The coaches are the same standard bi-level coaches we see on almost every railroad, but the locomotives include F59s and F59 PHIs, the former becoming more rare as more railroads retire them. I don't think it's nearly the worst railroad. Service could be added on Sundays, but I have to ask, why didn't they choose to run trains on the line that goes through Arlington, a city in the middle that's known to be the largest city in the country with no public transportation? That line has so much unrealized potential, and I don't know why it hasn't been done yet. Tri-Rail. Now on to the southernmost railroad. Tri-Rail technically has 2 lines, the main line running from Mangonia Park to West Palm Beach down through Fort Lauderdale to Miami Airport, with a branch to downtown Miami with 19 total stations. As you would expect with this line being in Florida, most stations are park and ride stations with not much around them besides parking, with a few exceptions. Services operate every day with half-hourly to hourly service on weekdays and hourly service on weekends, pretty much like most other railroad services. However, almost all services that run on the main line only go to and from Miami Airport. The line to Miami Central requires a connection at the Metrorail transfer station, but not every southbound service has a guaranteed connection. Only one inbound and outbound express train a day runs directly to Miami Central. The scenery is a bit lacking. Since the entire line runs through a mix of suburban and industrial areas, the line doesn't run through many green areas. Tri-Rail's livery has to be one of my favorites, and I think it's the only railroad to have realistic looking pictures for its livery. The new livery doesn't look as nice, very minimalistic in my opinion. Tri-Rail has a fleet featuring older and newer diesels like F40PHs, GP49H-3s, and Brookville BL36PH locomotives. Since the Metra area Tri-Rail runs through is more of a linear one, and the Metra area already has Brightline to help with route coverage, I think Tri-Rail does a good job serving the areas they run through. If only the surrounding areas were better designed. Virginia Railway Express. The last commuter rail in the Northeast, VRE is the second railroad that serves the Washington, D.C. metro area, serving the suburbs of Virginia with 2 lines, 90 miles of track, and 20 stations. Like MARC, VRE's frequencies aren't that great. In fact, frequencies on both lines are about as bad as MARC's Camden and Brunswick lines, since both lines only have services during rush hour on weekdays only. Some scenic highlights include the short section through the city, the dense forests on both lines the further away you get from Washington, and the run along the Potomac River on the Fredericksburg line. Motive power is nothing special. It's only MP36 locomotives again, with Nippon Sharyo bi-level coaches, the same fleet we've seen on a majority of railroads already. Wow, doing this tier list has made me realize how many railroads use the MP36 locomotives, a lot more than I realized. I will give them this. Their paint scheme is very nice and reminds me a bit of the American flag. My complaints are all the same as many others. Add more trains, maybe expand a bit, but in its current state, it's not the best it could be. WeGo Star. Formerly known as Music City Star, this 32-mile long line runs from downtown Nashville to Lebanon, Tennessee with 7 stations. Frequencies are exactly what you would expect, rush hour focus only. Trains run in both directions during peak times instead of all trains to Nashville in the morning and all to Lebanon in the afternoon as shown here. 2 trains start and end around the halfway point, meaning only 8 trains run the entire line. But overall, frequencies are still garbage. Oh, and there's no weekend service. Big surprise. The scenery and rolling stock make up for it a bit though. The line runs through some countryside east of Mount Juliet, but there's not much else. Only one type of locomotive runs the trains, some older EMD F40PHs in a nice purple paint scheme, which I think looks much nicer than the old livery, usually pulling 2 gallery cars behind it. So if you're into older trains, then this line would be perfect to Railfan. The route coverage isn't the best as it's only one line. Like Northstar, I think a lot could be done to make WeGo Star a much better railroad. WES Commuter Rail. WES serves the western suburbs of Portland, Oregon, with one line running between Beaverton and Wilsonville with 5 total stations. WES is an odd one, since it's Portland's only commuter rail line, while a majority of the city's rail transport is light rail. And similar to A-Train or Arrow, it doesn't even travel into the main downtown, requiring a transfer to the light rail at Beaverton. WES advertises that their trains run every 45 minutes, which is true, but only during rush hours, so for the majority of the day, there's no trains at all. And of course, no weekend service. All of the stations are pretty barren with not much around them, with kind of the exception at Beaverton. Speaking of, that station offers an easy connection to the Max Light Rail red and blue lines, which run way more frequently. The route isn't the most scenic, again, mostly running through suburban and industrial areas, but near the south end of the line, there's a bit of nice greenery, but only between the last 2 stations. For rolling stock, WES uses the strange Colorado Rail Car Aero train sets, the only railroad to operate them, since these railcars weren't very popular. So that makes railfanning on this line a bit more interesting. This line is basically like A train, where a transfer is needed to get into the city, but with far worse frequencies. WES should instead advertise that they run trains every 45 minutes, but outside rush hour, you might as well just drive. And there you go! All 28 commuter railroads in the United States ranked under my criteria. Am I wrong about most of these? Probably, but I hope you enjoyed the video regardless. How would you rank these railroads? Let me know in the comments, and also subscribe to the channel to help support future travels. I'd also love to hear your comments about what you think about these kinds of videos. I know this may have not been the most high quality, but I can always improve. Anyway, my name's Michael, and I'll see you around next time.